Let me explain some problems I had. I see where you guys are asking this question. I went online, I did a lot of research looking at YouTube videos where somebody else had answered the same question. And so you know what I found is 99% of them were incorrect. So I decided I didn't want to do that to you guys. So this is what I did. Since I've been playing guitar since 1989, I have every Fender catalog ever printed since the day I started playing guitar. Right? So I figured I'd go through and read them. So all week, I read all my Fender catalogs, looking at every specification, everything I could. Also, I want to explain something else to you. I have been to the Fender factory. There's a picture from the Fender. It says, Corona Manufacturing welcomes Philip McKnight and Ralph, my friend Ralph. I took him with me because it wasn't a Fender promotion thing. They didn't actually take me to the factory for training. I told them I wanted it, and I paid to go myself. So why is that interesting? Well, I've been selling Fender guitars for 8 years, fixing them for longer than that. I have been a guitar player from Fender guitars and basses for 20 years. I obviously have every catalog there ever was. I've been to the factories for training and for, just to learn about them. And I'm still confused. So of course you're confused. Why wouldn't you be? So let's see what I can do to clear that up. So this week I took a Mexican Strat, American Strat, and I disassembled them down to the components. I went through them. And I wanted to be able to tell you exactly why one guitar was double. And I couldn't find a damn reason. So let me explain something to you that I figured out. They are different, but what makes them different is just not enough to explain the cost. Now, that being said, let me explain this to you. Then it hit me, because you've seen me wear this shirt a ton of times. I actually have 4 or 5 of this exact same Fender t-shirt. So I bought this Fender t-shirt. It's not because I'm a Fender dealer. They didn't give it to me. They don't give you any promotional stuff like this. I bought this shirt. $15. It's a $5 Hanes shirt at Walmart. So I paid $10 for a Fender logo and $5 for a black t-shirt. That tells you a lot right there, doesn't it? You have to pay for Fender's designs, their brand, who they are. So let me see if I can explain a couple of reasons why, instead of telling you why they're different, why you would want one and not the other. Let's start with the neck. The Fender Mexican neck is 21 frets. The American one is 22. Original Fenders were all 21. Later they decided, probably in the 80s, that because the shredder guys needed more frets, like 24, Fender decided to add an extra fret. They did this by extending the fretboard. It is longer. The American Fender Strat is 22 frets, but it is the exact same neck. The first thing I want you to understand is that every single component on the Mexican Strat and the American Strat are interchangeable. I could crisscross these all day and you would never know what's going on, except for one thing. Fender knows this too. That's why they actually go out of their way to mark the bodies. This body is made in Mexico. That's why it's got 3 holes. If it was American, it'd only have the 1 hole. Now you're probably asking, why have a hole at all? Well, if you notice this hole here, these holes are there because there's a plate that comes onto the guitar that has 2 plugs that fill in those holes, and it tells the employee where to drill the holes for the pickguard. It's a template, in other words. Makes it easy. Plus, the Mexican bodies have a humbucker, single route. The Americans would have humbucker, single humbucker. And the American humbucker route, or the American routing system, is tighter and wastes less wood. Well, let's talk about the wood then. So what's different about the wood? Nothing. The Mexican bodies have 3 to 5 pieces of alder to make an alder body, where the Americans have 2. If you buy a Sunburst made Mexico Strat, it's a couple bucks more because they do a 2-piece body, just like the American, because they're exposing the wood and they want it to look correct. The electronics in the 2 guitars are almost identical. The potentiometers in both are made in Taiwan. The 5-way switches are both made in Mexico. The pickups in this one don't say where they're made, but I'm going to say either Mexico or Korea, and the American ones are made in America. The pickguards are both stamped out of the American factory. In fact, this is the before and the after of them stamping out the pickguards in the American factory for both the guitars. What about the bridge? Well, the bridge is easy. The bridges are different. The Mexico one's bridge is made in Korea, and it's not all steel. It's got some Chinese pot metal added to it. The saddles are chrome dipped and not nickel plated like the original ones. There's a 2-point system on the American ones, which is an improvement over the 5-screw. Although keep in mind, don't think that as quality, because vintage guitars all have the 5 screws as well. Biflex truss rod, anyone? In other words, the American ones have what's called a biflex truss rod. There's a screw underneath the 7th fret, underneath that dot, and this anchors the truss rod. The truss rod can push the neck in both directions, where the Mexican ones have a traditional truss rod, like a lot of guitars, where you can only push in one direction. Is that a big difference? No, but it's nice that you get the biflex. It helps to utilize every kind of every option to make that neck as straight as possible. Plus, there's a micro tilt in the neck as well, which allows you to change the angle of the guitar. What does that do? It just improves the performance. In fact, the American Strat, what it's oozing with is tons of performance. Rounded fretboard edges, polished frets, things that basically make it feel more high-end, which may necessarily not mean anything. In fact, a lot of the things that they do to the American Strat to make it better, it's actually to make it feel like you've been playing it for years. But if you picked a guitar and started playing it for years, it'd eventually feel like this as well. What about paint? Well, the Mexican ones are made of a polyester finish, and the American ones are polyurethane. We're talking only in the standard series and only for 2015. Well, what does that mean? Nothing. Both finishes probably cost about the same, and both are very good. In fact, the polyester finish is actually a harder finish and seems nicer than the polyurethane. They even use it on their high-end Jackson guitars, but it doesn't look as accurate. Not only is it because the original finish on the guitar should be lacquer, and therefore this is too shiny for that, and the polyurethane is less shiny, so therefore the polyurethane looks more like what it's supposed to look like. That brings us to this one. What is it supposed to look like? That's the crazy question of all. Think about this. Is a American Standard Strat better than a Made in Mexico vintage reissue, where the reissue has the real pickups, American pickups in it, lacquer body, lacquer neck, fit and finished in a different way? That's a hard question, right? I don't even know if I know the answer. In fact, this is where it gets all confusing all the way around. The whole thing is just built around confusion. And here's why. Because the best part about this whole thing is this is not the typical situation. Fender created a unique situation that they own and only them own, which is this. They built a factory in Mexico. They knew exactly how to do it because they've been doing it for years. They duplicate it in every way. They put good people in it. The people in Mexico, 1 in 5 play guitar. That's amazing. So that means there's a good chance that the person who built your guitar is a guitar player. That is not the same case in almost every factory I've ever been in. Most of them are not guitar players. Most of them are people who needed a job and started making guitars. So that being said, the question you have to ask yourself is, well, which one do you like more? Because here's the sad truth of it. The American ones hark to a vintage era. They're a piece of history. They're something that you give to your great-great-grandkids. They're just something cool because that's what they've always been. Does that diminish what the Mexican ones are? No, because I own both, and for the same reason. I just find one I like and I buy it. The question for me is not, is a Mexican Strat as good as an American Strat? The question is a Mexican Strat and a Mexican Telly as good as American Strat and dinner out with the family? Because that's the price, folks. A Mexican Strat, Mexican Telly, and dinner out with your family is what this guitar costs. So would you rather have one of each? Or just one that has more appeal? The last thing I want to touch on is the resale value. Again, more information on the internet. I saw over and over again people referring to the Americans ones of having the better resale value. I don't know if that's true. A Mexican one sells for $500 new. It's hard pressed to find them for $250 used. In fact, on average, you pay about $3. Sounds to me like you lose $200. American Strats sell for $1,300 new. I'm hard pressed in my shop to get $700 for them. In fact, it's almost impossible. I get about $6 to $650. I see people asking $7 and $8, but generally I think people want to pay about $6. And sometimes I hear that's even a problem. But I'm going to say $6. Well, we'll be fair, and we'll say $7. That means if you paid $1,300, right, you're going to lose $600. That's $100 more than the Mexican Strat cost, right? So sounds to me like the Mexican one is holding a slightly better value. And that's typical of any instruments. As price goes up, they have a higher depreciation point. Because people who buy high-end guitars generally want it the way they want it, and people who buy used high-end guitars are people who want high-end guitars but don't necessarily can't afford them, and so that they're willing to buy them but not really pay any premium for them. It's not a dig against anybody, that's just an explanation of the market at large. So the point of the whole video is this. Anybody who's telling you that the Mexican guitar is better than the American, and vice versa, is probably misinformed. As you can see, there was not a whole lot of differences between them. There are some things that matter, but almost everything on the Mexican Strat is interchangeable. So the question I have to say is this. This is where I left with my opinion on my own. If I took a Mexican Strat and $300, I can make it as good as an American Strat. I believe that to be 100% true. That puts that guitar at $800. That's still $500 less than American Strat. And that's even including a case in that scenario. So my question to you is, you have to decide if you really just want an American Strat. That's the question. And the truth is, a lot of us just want it because it's a piece of history. It's something you'll give to your grandkids. Although, I hate to say it this way, I have Mexican guitars, and I am not ashamed of them. I love them. In fact, I'm sometimes proud of that decision because I actually bought something really, really nice for a much better economic price. If I was a gigging musician, I can tell you right now, I'd have a Mexican Strat. That's what I play every night. Alright guys, I'm sorry the video was long and confusing. I hope I did okay. Thanks for your time. Know your gear.